So welcome back. And there is I call it sort of a navigational roadmap that every practitioner who's Gestalt trained has, emblazoned in them. And we call it the cycle of experience. So let's see what you think, Marianne. I think a couple of things to say on the beginning, and I'd encourage you to add anything more. This model is an attempt to map a phenomena. And it's actually, I think this is my favorite word to say in the English language. It's phenomenological. That just waterfalls right out of the mouth. I just love the phenomenological model. It's about phenomena that happen whether you choose to pay attention to it or not. And I think this idea that somehow if I know this model I can control something, you need to get that idea out of your head completely. Because this is going on and this is kind of indestructible. This sequence of events is our best attempt to map what comes as the successor and what's the predecessor as we go from being inert, the organism is at rest, to being through a process of coming to see that something matters and then mobilizing energy and moving to action and seeing a result. And then what did I learn from it? And that, it's like, again, this isn't something you teach. This isn't a map that you teach the client, but you know it. It's your map to guide you to think about where are we in this process? Are some people further ahead and some behind if it's a group? How do we get them together? Tell me, what else would you sort of say? Here are some caveats.
I would just say that as we go through this, everyone will probably recognize that this feels familiar because it is one of those, it is, we think, kind of a way of putting words to what is a natural human experience and the way we move through life. But in giving it some words and some of these stop action pictures, it helps us kind of be able to pause to say, does this phase need a little bit of attention? Would it support something a little bit better if we, so it just lets us kind of do a little bit of a diagnostic.
And that organism at rest. I remember you telling a story about being in a class where they had a mindful exercise where you were eating an orange.
Oh,
do you remember that?
I do.
Can you bring that back to life? Because that's such a beautiful example of sensation in its purest form.
Yeah, it was actually when I first came to the institute for like a little taster class when let me see what this is like, and they had us take an orange and take one of the segments and then put a piece of that segment in our mouth, and literally we had to just kind of taste it. We had to feel the texture of it. We had to go through all the sensations, the smelling, the taste, the texture, and had to chew it 100 times. A small little thing.
100 times.
100 times before you could swallow it. And that opened up this whole sense of there are all these sensations, experiences available if we slow down and pay attention. So that was like the little pointer to, you rush through these things as if they're a little dot. If you just pause, there's a whole lot.
You could take any one of these and unpack a myriad.
Exactly. So it's just a little kind of an example of what happens with all of our experience. That we kind of touch on it and move through it, but if we stop and pause, that there's a lot that sits underneath that and surrounds it.
So here's something I want us to speak to as we look at each of these stages, and I'll bring it up relative to sensation, and that's the idea of balance. Is that I think, obviously, if you did that with every single sensation, you wouldn't get out of bed in the morning.
You would not
be experiencing the sheets, and, and the smells of the pillowcase.
That was an exexercise to kind of open space.
But it is also instructive that the price we pay for going fast to get to action, and we're all biased for action. We're all like, this is all in my way. It's friction. I just want to do. Like, when can we just do, right? That we numb ourselves to all this, and then we lose the richness that can provide. So having a leader or a helper guide to the sensations that matter, we're not just doing all sensations here, but the sensations that matter given the work we've decided to do together is a role that you play. So speak to me about energy. Tracking energy is a very core idea in Gestalt. It's absolutely, when you're doing your work, for example, what are you looking for to know whether something's cooking?
Well, I'd say, much as you said before, that it's often, if sufficient attention's been paid to sensation and scanning, what's going on in me, what's going on in the other, something starts to get kind of interesting or start to kind of take center stage in some way, that's when you're starting to say, the energy is starting to, so what I see is you might see a glimmer in someone's eye, you might see someone sit up in their chair. You might see someone flush. You might see them get a little bit more rapid, more invested, more. So there's lots of signals that there's something happening that's moving us from.
Yeah.
So that's where the artistry, I think, comes in, and the paying attention to the person.
Well, and I think why it's not a technique or a skill.
Yeah.
It's in the moment.
Right.
And that's the difference. Because
Right.
if I just went to my recipe book, I would say, oh, now I'm supposed to name what they just did.
Right.
And you could interrupt a whole process.
Right.
Inadvertently. Well, I followed the instructions. And so we can't think of it as a toolkit with techniques in it.
Exactly.
It's being alert and present ourselves.
In this moment, and who this person is, and what their patterns are, and what might be different, because we're often looking for, again, trying to kind of like move outside of pattern.
So we go to meaning. And the word, that word figure, we talked about that in the last video. I often see in the literature a reference, and this is more with organizational work maybe, that it gets represented as a common theme that's starting to emerge. But it is something you can picture and taste and feel with your senses. It's not just a head thing, right?
For example, like what do you think?
Like I'm thinking, I think every organization in the world says that we're going to be the best at what we do. So it's like having a vision that says, you know, we're the premier XYZ deliverer of the XYZ service. It just leaves me cold. It's like there's nothing unique or special about that. Whereas a vision that says, and this is the mission statement for the Mayo Clinic in Minnesota, we heal the sick while we advance the science. And I think about how that activates a picture in my mind when I hear that. I get a picture, you know, a helper with a vulnerable patient. I can picture, and it could be a nurse or a doctor. It doesn't specify. You know, that's what we do. You know, we heal the sick and advance the science. Any ounce of achievement energy you have in you has to be stimulated by that statement. Advancing the science, do what no healthcare system has ever done before. And, you know, that's so much better than we're the best medical system in the country.
Well, I'm thinking of, actually, as you're talking, I was thinking of, you know, some groups that I've worked with where they're really working on their vision statements. And where you're really listening, because you want so much. You want people, you know, in that organization to kind of really come up with what really speaks to them, what engages their head, heart, gut in it. So when you start to feel like something's moving, you just want to slow it down. You want to maybe have different people in the group speak to that. So people say, yeah, me too. Or, so there's some sense that we're really joining kind of at all levels before we kind of move it forward.
And one technique I learned definitely in the groups class, I can go right back to one of my Gestalt programs, was this idea that asking the other people listening to make an impact statement. So like if somebody says, I want to advance the science, to say, let's pause for a moment. I think when you work with one individual as a coach, there's one set of sort of variables and the way it feels, and with a group, it's like orders of magnitude more because you're tracking a group of individuals and the whole, and kind of moving along.
Yeah, and yet the beauty of when you can work with a group or a team and, you know, do the work to be able to support them to really be able to kind of envision this together, to make meaning of it together, to move something forward is. It's like, it's magic.
Action. If the energy and the figure is strong enough, not only will action happen, but it's unstoppable. You know, it may not be the one you imagined. You know, they may do their own little riff on it or whatever, but it's unstoppable. And I think that action means we connect. And this is something that I really turn to you, Marianne, this notion of change and meaningful contact. I think because you work in the therapeutic arena, you do this work at a level deeper than most of us who do organizational consulting will do it. But I think it informs how powerful and important it is. So not that we would do it the way you might in your therapeutic settings, but tell me what meaningful contact means to you.
Well, I think about it actually, I do a lot of community psychology. So in working with community leaders from the Middle East, for example, you know, from Israel, Palestine, Jordan, Egypt, that there's a sense in terms of the contact that we're looking for some exchange where how one person is taken in by the other person in a way that changes changes me and
Yeah.
changes my experience and my
Yeah.
perception of you and changes me as a result. So what we're looking for in that kind of contact or as an action, again, we do lots of work in those programs to support people to
Yeah.
get below their stereotypes of each other, to
Yeah,
get below
right.
the, and to really make meaningful contact. But it really is, am I changed by this encounter? You know, has something that I maybe previously thought about you or your group
Yeah.
fallen away in the presence
Yeah.
of my really taking you in?
Yeah.
So there's a sense of novelty. There's often a sense of surprise or
Curiosity
aha,
gets
a
sparked, too.
curiosity, and a sense that I walk away different. I feel different. I am different.
This point, I think, needs to be made to land the plane on this for a consultant, a leader, a practitioner of this. Our job is to see and respect everyone's experience and their relationship to one another as unique beings present in the moment with each other, and not to make up my mind or make up a story in my head about what's going on and impose it.
Personally, I think that's one of the strongest human qualities of Gestalt, is that it really, I think it honors and respects the individual,
Yes.
the person to be able to speak
Yeah.
their own experience, and that our job is to get their world.
And the something that happens, as you said, is transformational. I'm not the same afterward.
Yeah.
We can't go back.
Right.
Can't do a rerun it. When it's above the line, it doesn't have that impact. It can only have that impact below the line, right?
Yeah, but above the line, I might like learn something new. I might have some new information.
A fact. Yeah.
But below the
Yeah.
line, I am
Yeah.
affectively,
Good.
emotionally,
Yeah.
head, heart, gut,
Yeah.
changed in some way.
So moving a boundary is another way to talk about this change that somebody might hear in one of these classes, and that might be a way to do it. You made a comment to me that you can't do closure without assimilation. So for you, what does assimilation as we bring an ending? You know, we started with something, now we've completed one turn of the cycle. What?
Yeah. Well, to me, it's that move from being in the present
Yeah.
moment with this, of taking
Yeah.
the action of experiencing the
Yeah.
change, the contact, the shift
Yeah.
in me, and then stepping
Yeah.
back and then reflecting on it.
Yeah.
So it's that reflective place of, what was that experience like? What did I learn? What am I taking with me?
Yeah.
What am I going to do with it? What supports
Yeah.
do I need?
And of course, we can go around this in a flash and not even notice the steps. And we can go around and around and around, because as new things change, that can become new data that starts to cycle over. So it's kind of hard to visually represent this, right? Or I could take this and need a time to pause and go and rest. I think, you know, as I think about this, in everything we do in Gestalt, this is kind of our navigating tool inside us as practitioners. And, you know, if we bring attention to these stages to the person, we do it in language that fits them
Absolutely.
in the moment.
Yeah.
Any last closing words before we end our little discussion on cycle of experience?
I don't think so.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.